Welcome to the Diversity and Inclusion Seminar Series. My name is Iris. I am part of the AVID Diversity team, and I will be hosting the session today. This seminar series is organized by the AVID Diversity team. AVID is an organization run voluntarily by PhDs and postdocs, and is advocating for the rights and representing the scientific staff at ETH Zurich. The aim of the diversity team is to make ETH a more diverse and inclusive place for all. And before we begin, I will give a short overview of the schedule, procedure, and today's guidelines. The talk will be around 40 minutes. Afterwards, we have a question and answer session. If you have a question, please type it in the chat box, and we will ask the question to the speaker to facilitate the conversation. The general guidelines of this seminar are: please leave your camera turned off, and remember to type your comments and questions into the chat box. While we anticipate no issues, you will be immediately removed if you use any harmful or hateful speech in the chat box. And it is a pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Shaila Kotadia. Dr. Kotadia is the Director of Justice, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion for the Human Resources Group in the School of Medicine at Stanford University. Dr. Kotadia's pronouns are she, her. Dr. Kotadia received her PhD in genetics and development at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Today, Dr. Kotadia will talk about how to transform institutional culture. And as Dr. Kotadia describes, in order to transform institutional cultures, action must be taken in a collective manner. No one person can do this work alone. In addition, it is important to recognize that both top-down approaches by the leadership and administrative levels and grassroots approaches by individuals are needed. In this seminar, Dr. Kotadia will share methods on how to make change at both the institutional and individual levels. Thank you all for attending, and please type your questions and comments into the text box for the question and answer session. Dr. Kotadia, please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Iris. I will share my screen. Okay. So thank you, Iris, for that kind introduction. Because I want to make it in 40 minutes, I'm just going to get right to it. So today I'm going to talk about transforming institutional culture. And I thought something that would be helpful is to say what this is and what this isn't, just to frame what approach I'm taking for this seminar. Because there's a lot of content available, I just want everyone to sort of be on the same page. So in this presentation, I will share a little bit about my career journey, and then most of my presentation is talking about guidance as we take action on the institutional and individual level, and giving sort of guiding principles and questions to ask yourself as you're doing this work, and explaining why I am sharing those questions. And I encourage you all to ask questions as well. Like Iris said, we will take questions at the end, but if a question comes to your mind as I'm speaking, feel free to put it in the chat so we can address it later. What this isn't like an educational lecture, a training. I put DEI 101, anti-racist education. I think there is a lot of that available online, and I encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities and to self-educate and use that as a basis if anything is maybe unclear, because the amount of background I'm going to do, I'm going to say is pretty minimal, because I did want to get to those guiding questions. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to start with my career journey. And while I'm doing my career journey, I'm also going to intertwine some personal anecdotes, because I think that my personal and professional journey are interconnected. And so it's hard to separate the two sometimes. And I think that's normal for all of us. And also the reason I wanted to do this was, you know, when I got the invitation and I looked at the audience before I saw on Twitter that this was open, was that it was students and postdocs and staff. And so I think to hear each other's professional journeys is really important. And in this Zoom webinar world where it feels like I can connect across the world, yet you can see me and I can't necessarily see each and every one of you. It's nice to share our stories so we can get to know each other better. So I did start my career in science. I think I don't have one of those moments where I did an experiment as a kid and I knew I wanted to be a scientist. That is, if you know me, that's definitely not my personality. But I did take classes in high school. I had the privilege and opportunity to take some science classes in high school, and that piqued my interest, and that's sort of how I got started on the journey. One personal anecdote I wanted to share that gets at the nuance of privilege in life is that when I was in high school, I took a physics class and I was telling my dad that I enjoyed it, or I was telling him something about it. And he was like, oh, yeah, my father was a physics professor at a university in India. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't know that. He had never shared that with me before, which is so interesting to think about and reflect on now. And at the same time, because I found that out when I was in high school, probably when I was 16, and my grandfather passed away when I was 19. So, and we rarely went to India because it was so expensive. And so I never met him in person after I found that out. And I think I maybe had talked to him once in between then. But at the same time, even though I didn't have those interactions with him, the fact of the matter is it is a part of who I am. And even having that information is a privilege that allows me, you know, in some ways would probably give me confidence that I can do science as well, right? So it's those nuances in life that really help us put us forward on a certain journey. And I'm not saying that you necessarily need that, but it's part of my journey. So I went to undergrad and I was a cell and structural biology major. I went straight to grad school and I got my PhD in genetics and development from the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Took a little break between grad school and my postdoc. I think that's one of the smartest life decisions I did. And I did my postdoc at UC Santa Cruz. And while there, I had a fellowship that ended unexpectedly early. And so I had to sort of make a decision a year before that I was prepared to about where I wanted to go in my career. And I just decided to go for everything. I had always had in my mind to go for a faculty position. And so I applied for a ton of faculty positions, but then knowing that I was open to other opportunities and that getting a faculty position can be very difficult, I decided to apply to policy fellowships, outreach positions, research development positions, pretty much anything except working in industry or at a company. I went on a faculty interview and I came back and it just wasn't right. Something didn't feel right. It wasn't the right location for me. It wasn't, I didn't know if that's the life I wanted. I think there was, I didn't feel the right sense of belonging. And I think we hear that a lot when people leave science, right? Because there's certain systems and structures of science. And And you know, I didn't get the offer for the faculty position, but I did get an offer for a research development position and a science policy fellowship with the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. And so I ended up taking that science policy fellowship and worked in Washington, D.C. In the US, and did that for less than a year. Don't think that, figured out that wasn't right for me either. But what I did know is that during my postdoc, I did a lot of outreach efforts, and I enjoyed that. And so I thought, what if I did that for a living? And so at the time, my partner, who I am now married to, he was in Berkeley. And I thought, well, if I can choose somewhere where I want to live, why not try to live in the same city? And also, I liked California. And but I didn't want to move until I had a job. And so I was very fortunate to get a job at UC Berkeley, where I worked at an engineering research center as their education and outreach program manager. And I ran a lot of programs that were for individuals who, you know, are underrepresented in the sciences. And as I was running those programs and working with the students, I really enjoyed it. But you know, you come to that realization of, I left the system because of um, certain feelings of a sense of belonging and these cultures in science, and yet I am running these programs to encourage students to go into that system. So that's become sort of this internal conflict, and thinking about how how you do that work. And for me, it really meant being honest. And so I was really honest with the students in my programs about, you know, what my journey was, why I left, and telling them that they're great, right? They're great, and if they want to stay, they should stay. And that I was there to support them and to help them, work with them, give them the tools they needed, use my knowledge of being in the system to help them navigate the system. But and in the end, it is a choice, right? But you need those support networks, and I wanted to be a support network for them. And at the same time, I also wanted to change the system, right? Because I felt like I'm doing them a disservice if I'm not working to make systemic change. And that's sort of what led me to this justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion work, and how I navigated into that in a more systemic way is that I at UC Berkeley, after my position ended at that engineering research center, I had started this program to seed projects to for other individuals to do this work, and then helping connect the people who ran the programs, the participants in the programs, and the researchers who look at what works. And that led to me working in the Division of Equity and Inclusion at UC Berkeley to do an institutional assessment of 118 STEM diversity programs on the campus, and then really tease out what's working, what's not working, why. And then really what I wanted to do was to start breaking down the silos of the institution, to help people connect who are doing this work, because this idea of collective action, if we could work together, we could leverage our resources, we could leverage our practices, understand and learn from each other. And so I started to do that work. However, that was a part-time position that was on short-term contracts. I had a baby, I had a Remy. And so I was working 3 days a week, and I was taking care of him 2 days a week. But because we lived in the Bay Area, I really, it's really expensive. So I was consulting, I dance as a hobby. And so I was doing the science and dance organization, you know, doing workshops, trying to you know, I needed to make up for that part-time salary, and it just became really unsustainable. And so that's what led me to Stanford, because I was looking for a full-time stable career position. and I went to be the director of culture and inclusion, again, in a sort of centralized role in a decentralized institution, looking at ways in which individual offices are doing this work, and how we can connect and work together better to create change. And that role has now shifted me to a new opportunity in the human resources group at the School of Medicine as a director of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So that's where I am now. And the approach we're going to take is start looking at all the systems we have in HR, assuming that they are biased, and then start breaking them down and making them equitable and inclusive. So I'm just looking at the time, and I'm going to move on to the presentation, but I hope that and maybe some part of that journey was relatable, or there's a common humanity piece, or it just gives some sort of perspective on different paths that we can all take in our lives. So today I'm going to talk about how we can make change at different levels. And this is from Carrie Suarez, who's at Equity in the Center. And it's just looking at 4 different levels of racism. And this doesn't have to be racism. We can say 4 different levels of oppression, of another ism. But the point I want to get across here is that there's, this personal level, these ideas and beliefs that we have as individuals, this interpersonal level, because we're going to be interacting, different individuals we're going to be interacting with on a daily basis. Then there's the institutional level, right? What are our policies and practices in our organizations and institutions that are discriminatory? And then going further out, there's a structural level, right? This is at the societal level. And it's perpetuated in every one of these levels. And today I'm going to start with the institutional, and then in the first half, and then the second half, I'm going to get at the personal and the interpersonal. So when we talk about the institutional level, one thing that Iris mentioned in my intro is that that we're going to do this at the grassroots level, and it has to be at the leadership level. And you really need both, right? You need people on the ground who are saying we need to make change. We see this in the US with the recent protests, right? Why are organizations like companies and higher ed institutions paying so much more attention now, right? If that there is a groundswell, and we need to pay attention to that, because that isn't, I didn't start my job just less than 6 months ago. I've been doing this for almost a decade, right? So, and others have been doing this, the origins of this goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, right? These are not new things that are happening. And so we do need to start listening more, and taking action. At the same time, the leadership needs to recognize that a lot of these institutional processes start from that level, and at the administrative level, and things need to change. So no one's absolved from not doing this work. It's a sense of personal responsibility, and I'm speaking from my personal opinion that I do think that every individual needs to contribute. So when we look at institutional structures, it's really important to think about how they're structured. And I'm showing this especially as I think about my work at Stanford, but your institution, each institution is going to be structured in a different way. So I ask you to take some time to reflect and think about how your institution is structured. There are leadership, administrative positions. I'm an administrator. I have to take responsibility and understand where I sit in this institution and what kind of position and power I have with that. And one thing I've noticed at Stanford is I take on these centralized positions But there's a decentralized nature to the institution where a lot of the culture lives locally at the departmental level. And then if you dig even deeper, each individual lab in the sciences has its own culture, right? So there are different levels in which we're operating, where culture lies, and we need to recognize that as we think about how to make culture change. And so having said that, what I'm going to do now is go through a series of questions that I often ask myself as I'm doing my work. And I hope that those questions help you reflect on how you want to take action, and where your power and positionality stands as you take action. And one thing I've been talking about with this group I'm going to talk about that I work with is that everyone has power. Everybody has power to make change, and it's just recognizing where you have power. And I will preface with, as I was making this presentation, I kept adding more and more questions, and I was like, I need to stop. And so I think that this is not an exhaustive list, and that there could be more things that you could be asking. So first, getting at this idea of how is power centralized versus decentralized, right? When we have a very decentralized structure, and there are these local cultures, it sometimes makes it very difficult to make change because you might not have enough individuals participating, or you might not have communication strategies. So it's if you can figure out how your institution is structured and where power lies, then it helps you figure out where and what levels you can make change at. And then as you're doing your work, how are you creating strategic transformational plans? So I gave this analogy the other day in a meeting. I was talking about my son's, like he's almost 4 and he does puzzles. And so I'm watching him do these puzzles and I'm just like, okay, that's interesting. That's an interesting approach, because he's like doing 2 pieces here and doing 2 pieces here. And he's sometimes forcing pieces to go together. I should probably give him a break, because he's just about to turn 4. But there's this really, like, when he's done with the puzzle, right, there's this really pretty picture that when all these pieces fit together, there's this pretty picture that we're trying to achieve. And here, I think of that picture of like an inclusive culture, a sense of belonging for each individual in the organization, especially as you build a diverse organization. And what I see individuals doing, or groups doing a lot, is doing a little bit of work here, a little bit of work here, a little bit of work here, but not thinking about how all those pieces of the puzzle fit together to make that inclusive culture. And so sometimes it's really helpful to create, strategic plans, transformational plans, so you see how those pieces fit together. And I will say that there's a lot of guidance out there about how to do this. UC Berkeley has some online materials, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and the AAMC, the Association of American Medical Centers, or I hope I'm getting that right. I apologize if that's the wrong interpretation of the acronym, but my point is that you can find guidance and toolkits for that. And then who are you engaging in the process, right? If you're changing the culture, who are you changing the culture for? And how are you including those individuals? And when you include those individuals, what is the process? Like, how are you doing that? How are you interacting with individuals? How are you compensating individuals for their work? And how are you recognizing their time and their labor? One piece that I think that is really, really crucial is how is accountability embedded at each of these levels and in your strategic planning, right? If there's no accountability or resources that you integrate into your plan, then it's less likely that maybe the change will be made. So as you make your plans and think about how you want to change institutions, think about how to embed accountability. How are you reviewing existing policies, programs, et cetera, right? I think we have a lot of policies, we have a lot of programs that we run, but sometimes once they're going, it's sort of like you're just moving from year to year, and sometimes it's important to take a step back and look at what you're doing and think, is that the right approach? Are we asking, when I was talking about the programs I was doing and thinking about the students, am I asking them to like assimilate? Is that what into the scientific culture, like asking them to meet these standards that I don't necessarily believe in? And is that the right thing to do, right? And so it's important to really review and look at what bias might be embedded into that. And then this is getting more at this decentralized structure. Let's say, yesterday somebody mentioned that we have, 30 plus departments in the School of Medicine at Stanford. And so each department might be doing a different thing. So how are we aligning between those different departments? That's really important, right? Because that alignment, I'm not saying that each one has to be exactly the same, because there's going to be nuances, but it's important for all of us to talk to each other. It's, again, this idea of that you're going to make mistakes. That's just normal. And then you're going to have to learn, and being able to share practices amongst each other and align some of your efforts will often allow you to have more power to make change. Measuring to track progress for change, figuring out what are, once you make your plan, what are the right metrics to track progress, so you can look at change over time, look at what's working and what's not working, so you can be iterative and refine. And then working together, I think I talked about this 2 slides ago, but working together across departments and labs. And then how are you communicating what you're doing with leadership, right? A lot happens at the individual level, at the departmental level, let's say, but how is that being communicated up? Who's keeping track of all of this? So this is just a summary of the guiding questions I gave, and I hope these are useful for you as you think about how your own local environment is making change at your own institution. Okay, I'm just going to check for time again, and I'm going to switch now to this sort of interpersonal part. So one thing I did at Stanford with a group of individuals is create this certificate in critical consciousness and anti-oppressive praxis. I'm not going to go into the details of the program. I put the website up here if you want to learn more, but I wanted to share some of the guiding principles and questions that we give participants in the program that are also on the website. So just some background, I do want to acknowledge the individuals who helped create this program. We all work together. When I first started at Stanford, I met Deb Carson, and I will mention that Deb is currently looking for a faculty position. She's a neuroscientist. So if you are looking for an individual who is talented and incredible scientist, I encourage you to reach out to me and I can connect you to Deb. So Deb and I were talking, and she was saying that in order for her to be a scientist, right, in a way where she doesn't have to worry about the constant racism, sexism, all these isms that she's facing, the institution needs to change. And I agreed with that, and that we needed some sort of programming to do that. At the same time, Taylor and Jesse had made a had taken a diversity, inclusion, and science mini course, and their proposal at the end of the course was to make some sort of certificate program. And so Deb, Jesse, and Taylor had all been working together with a few other individuals, and we sort of all came together since we had the same goals. I was really interested in building something as well. Brenda Flores is a research and program officer that I used to work in the same office with, and I knew she was interested in this work, so I asked her, oh, well, at the administrative level, does she want to join me in creating this program? And she also has a bachelor's in psychology and really deeply thinks about the human experience. So I've really appreciated her support, both administratively and from a personal level. And then that, we started, the 5 of us, and we created this program and piloted it. And Jesse has since gone on to a AAAS fellowship in the US. And so Eamon, I have this sort of plus sign because Eamon was a participant in the pilot program, and he has now joined our core team as Jesse has rotated off and joined our advisory board. And really the mission of this program is based on not only Paulo Freire's work, but I'm pulling out a quote from him where it says, functionally, oppression is domesticating. To no longer be prey to its force, one must emerge from it and turn upon it. This can be done only by means of the praxis, reflection, and action upon the world in order to transform it. And the reason I'm using this quote is because this program is really rooted in praxis and using this constant cycle of reflection and action, and the understanding that you're going to do this all through life. And there are 3 main pedagogical areas. We focus on the critical understanding of identity and positionality, the exploration of current and historical oppressive infrastructures that have arrested progress towards a just future, and then developing a culturally aware praxis to substantiate transformative inclusive change. So basically, we're having individuals learn about self in the context of all our systems, and then move to action. And it's this moving to action piece that I wanted to dig a little deeper on, because when we are talking to our participants about taking action, we have these guiding principles. And I want to acknowledge that Deb has been the lead in this space of these guiding principles and guiding questions. And then the core team has kind of helped refine. And so it's transformative change really confronts dominant narratives, right? Looking at what are say the stereotypes that are out there, and then thinking about counter narratives, why those aren't true, and then balancing these different systems of privilege and challenging unjust power dynamics. And that the action is performed not for a community, but with, right? Really understanding a community, figuring out how to integrate into that community without trying to save them. And then you cannot employ methods of dehumanization. You need to center the community's needs, recognizing the humanity in each individual. And again, that reflection follows every action. And when you do that, it should help you discover more about yourself, the commonalities you share with the community, also the differences and how those are of value. And that within a program context, that it's not that you complete action, right? This is going to be continual for the rest of your life. And these are some questions that we ask everyone to reflect on as they're doing their work. It is recognizing those dominant narratives that you might hold, and how have those blocked you from seeing full humanity, right? We're not perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. We all have bias. So it's recognizing that, and then being able to understand that and move from there. Understanding what skills and talents and powers and privileges you have. It's about how you use your power and privilege to empower other individuals around you. What community are you seeking to be a part of, and why? Why is that? Digging a little deeper as to why you want to do the work you're doing. Then how are you interacting with the community? How are you engaging the community? How are you in conversation? How are you understanding what the community's needs are and being able to articulate those needs? And then how does this practice elevate the work that's already in existence? I think a lot of times everybody's reinventing the wheel or wanting to do something from scratch, but there's a lot of community level work already in existence. And so it's more about understanding what's out there and then how we work together and build. Then these last three questions I think are really, really important because they kind of relate to one another. So it's understanding what's the impact of the benefit of whatever you're doing, right? We say project just because it's the we have to put a term on it to fit into this programmatic structure, but it's whatever work that you're doing in the community, like how are you benefiting the community? How is this creating sustainability? How are you using that to sustain these efforts? At the same time, you are going to benefit from the work you're doing. And you need to understand that. You need to understand how you're benefiting from it, and that understanding how it's transforming yourself as well as whoever is oppressed in that system, how it's transforming them. And then it's really taking those questions 6 and 7 and getting at that balance. Like, is it, does the benefits the community outweigh the benefits you're gleaning? Because if you're getting more out of this, I think you really need to take a step back or reflect on that as to then why you're really doing this. Is it really for yourself? Because that I would say is not necessarily the approach that we want to take. It's really about changing systems for the oppressed, unless you relate to that group, right? So it becomes really nuanced, but it's also it's very much understanding that balance as you do the work, depending on your own identity. So when I was originally making this presentation, I went and read the anti-racism statement and thought, if we take this, AVETH's anti-racism statement and say, these are the changes you're doing, I encourage you all to think about how you can build these actions into a larger strategic transformational plan at the institutional level, at the departmental level, at the individual lab level. And then doing these, as you're doing these seminar series, let's say, those guiding values and questions can help guide why you're doing this. Like, why did you invite me, right? I'm very appreciative, but, deeply understanding why you asked me to come speak versus someone else is something that you need to reflect on and understand the larger puzzle, as the pieces fit together. And that's not to say that hasn't happened, just putting it out there. And then I just ended with this quote. There's a Vanity Fair issue called The Great Fire, and Ava DuVernay interviews Angela Davis. And one quote from that article, as I was putting together this presentation, really stuck out to me. And the question that was posed was, like, what I don't exactly remember the question, but it was, saying, all these diversity and inclusion offices are popping up in institutions and companies and higher ed, right? And what does that mean, right? And this quote from Angela Davis, which is part of her larger answer, says, she says, diversity and inclusion without substantive change, without radical change, accomplishes nothing. And that really, I think that's very true from my experience, right? We can do a lot of diversity and inclusion work, but that doesn't mean we're actually changing institutions. We really need to think about how we're changing our systems. And that really is where we're going to make radical change. And so with that, okay, it's 8:40, so we have some time for questions. I just want to thank you all for joining and your participation.